Let me introduce the speaker this morning, Colart Miles. Colart is one of the country's leaders in the space of dealing with issues around change. Not necessarily organisational change, but the changing economy that we have around us. What role is technology playing? How might that change? What's the impact on your business? And the reason we thought today's topic would be particularly of interest for yourselves is change is something we hear quite a lot about, but is it real? Is it fiction through journalism, or is it a phenomenon that's happening around us? And if it is real, what do you need to do to prepare for it? Colart has got a passion of helping business and organisations speed up their innovation process to take advantage of this. He's a specialist in value-driven techniques like lean, like agile, words that you may well have heard a lot about. And in early 2015, after 20 years of experience, Colart founded a company called Velox, which are specialists in helping businesses accelerate through that innovation process. They work closely with companies like Down in New Zealand. They've been the team as the leading delivery partner for Callaghan Innovation Team. So comes with incredible experience in most categories in a number of countries around the world. So without further ado, it's my great privilege to welcome Colart.
Thanks, everyone.
So let's start with getting an elephant into the room. Is change real? Is it actually fiction, or is this a real thing?
I wonder if we could get the audience to help us answer this. All right. So I've got an example to share. That's one of my slides. I believe it is. Yes, is the short answer. Yep. But there's probably a longer answer is what are the types of changes we expect? What are the types of changes you're seeing? Hands up who's heard of Pokemon Go? Should be the most of the audience, right? Should we use that as a bit of a case study to just check whether this is real or not? Right. Have I got slides? Oh, is it over there? Okay. So I'll just flick forward.
Do you want to swap?
Can I have a look at that?
Yeah. No. Yeah. Why don't you do that?
I'll just do
that.
Going to
help your presentation.
Thanks, guys. Sorry about that. So has anyone sort of been... So I guess you've heard about Pokemon Go. You've heard all the media buzz around it and that, oh, wow, everyone's got them. But I wanted to kind of home in on the board of Nintendo for a moment, all right? Right back to July the 6th, when Pokemon Go was launched, all right? And what happened in the sort of 48 hours to 72 hours after that happened, right? So they woke up one morning and they went, what's going on? Our stock price is going up and up and up to the tune of their market cap was 14.6 billion. This is straight off Google, by the way. I did my Microsoft Paint thing, labeling on it. So 14.6, and it jumped to 41 billion by the time it started to peak, all right? So somewhere in there, they more than doubled their market cap within about a 4 or 5 day period, all right? And what drove that was the uptake of Pokemon Go. It got the whole ecosystem in a fizz. And I guess just to put that in perspective, the number of daily users of Pokemon Go reached the same level as Twitter within about 72 hours. So it's incredible uptake, viral, saturated. But what that did was it confused the market. The market actually thought, whoa, Nintendo's doing really well. They've done something incredibly different. They've pivoted. They've done something really cool. And it changed the game for them. Once they started peaking out, I think that spike over there, where it started dropping, do you know what happened there? Can anyone sort of guess? Where it started dropping and they started to come to their senses a little bit. They realized they didn't actually own Pokemon Go. That's a bit awkward. So Nintendo didn't actually own Pokemon Go. They owned shares in a company that owns Pokemon Go. It's a company called Niantic. And the market didn't really realize that until about a week later. So can you imagine, 2 weeks after that spike. So can you imagine what my life must have been like for that board? It's a bit of a roller coaster ride. So this is the kind of thing that we're seeing around the ecosystem, our business ecosystem, is that things that seem pretty far away and far-fetched can rush up on us pretty quickly, and they can change your circumstances quite dramatically. And this is not an isolated incident. We're seeing pockets of this. So bring attention to a more recent dairy price drop, and the fluctuation, the volatility around that. This has dramatic ripple effects through our economy, as you guys know. You're on the front line, and for companies that are living and dying by their results, this is a tough environment to be in. So I don't know if does that sort of answer the question. Does anyone want to add anything into that? Health and safety. With the pressures that come from that, like, so we've got a renewed interest and a renewed vigor around improving the prospects and health and safety outcomes for our businesses. That creates yet another pressure to try and respond to. In an already turbulent environment to operate in as a business, it starts to really add dynamics, doesn't it?
One of the things we've talked a little bit about SparkLab in the past is the influence of technology that has changed the game. So
Yes.
take a category like accommodation. The world's largest hotelier, Airbnb, that owns no beds, owns no infrastructure. The world's largest transportation company, Uber, that owns no cars. The world's largest media company, Facebook, that owns no talent, creates no content itself. Recently, we were told that Uber is now the 5th most valuable auto manufacturing company in the world. It's worth more than GM Motors. So is this a trend that's going to continue in your mind, or is this a moment in time?
Absolutely. It will absolutely continue. And I think we're at what a lot of our experts and I guess the sort of consensus in my circles are that we're at the beginning of a knee bend of a curve. So even though we've enjoyed a massive upswing in those types of changes, we're expecting many more of them that cause tectonic shifts. And there's a couple of drivers for that. And I think Pokemon Go is a good example of that. It didn't just release into ether and everyone adopted Pokemon Go. You needed a mobile platform. You needed an engaged, primed user base. So they were like, they'd heard of Pokemon. Everyone had sort of grown up seeing the cartoons, and that echoed and raised sentiment. One of my friends in New York writes for the Washington Post, and his comment was, I just thought it was a great summary. He said, wow, Pokemon Go was, it took 20 years to make that overnight success. And that's symptomatic of where we are now. A lot of the changes that we're seeing clicking into place now have actually had long lead-ups, all right? And they're relatively invisible to the business that can't see them. So this is where we start to get into the mindset stuff, right? So this is a sort of 3 or 4 ideas I wanted to share with you guys for this session. And one of them is just around what are the lenses that you're looking through to understand your business and the context around your business. And so one of the lenses that we're used to is often described as scaled efficiency. We'll do whatever we do really well, and then let's see if we can make as many of those sales happen so that we can take our margin and keep our business healthy and keep everything sustained. All right, so scaled efficiency. We do one thing or a few things really well, and we scale that out, and we try and cut costs. So we lean out. Lean and agile sort of comes into this, is trying to optimize the value that you get for whatever capital you've got deployed in your business. Now, the risk with that kind of thinking is that you start to, you don't play as much, right? So there's no room in there for imagination. There's room for get stuff done. So what we're seeing is, with that is often described as a linear mentality. So you kind of go, well, what was last year? Well, our strategy is last year plus 10%. Does everyone sort of resonate with that? Does that kind of land? Yep. Our strategy is last year plus 10%. What we're seeing is that with a changing landscape and big shifts that can happen, that's not necessarily the best strategy. So the alternative to that, and that's kind of one of the things I wanted to float with you guys, is it's just a different lens to look through. So if we said one lens was, scaled efficiency, we want to get the most out of the business model that we've got. Well, the other lens might be more of an exploration. Like, what are we doing in our business to understand learning? So scaled learning would be the alternative. As a gentleman named John Hagel does a lot of work on this stuff. So scaled efficiency, let's kind of get more out of what we've got. Scaled learning means every individual, every agent in your business and around you is part of a regular learning experience that actually tries to explore different futures.
So play that out for the room. So what, is that suggestion boxes? Is that workshops? Is that what does it mean?
It's a great question. I think it's a collection of measures. Actually, this evening's speaker, Tina Jenin, she shared an example with me that really summarized it beautifully. She said, if you ask your kid to go into a room and fetch something, they're going to go into a room and fetch something, right? They're task focused. Hey, they go in there, they get, and then they come back out again. And she says, did you notice anything in the room? No. I went to fetch the thing that you asked me to get in the room. Yeah. But she says, well, what if I ask that child to go and play in the room? They'll experience the room very differently, won't they? Right. They'll kind of understand it a lot differently. So I think that's the argument that we're trying to create here is, as a business, you need to create the capacity or a way for your business to appreciate the room that it's in a lot more. And it's a matter of survival now. It's not actually even
Right. Because what's interesting about the linear plus 10% is often that mentality is at a board level. So board says to management, says to staff, we want X plus 10. Yeah. To go back into the board and say, actually, we'd like to play.
That's a tough ask, right?
I'm not the first guy that's going to go and ask to do that.
Absolutely.
But it's required. Yes. So in your experience, how do you start embracing a business for a conversation like that?
So I guess kind of stepping back to the role of the board is there primarily to protect value in the business. Right? Sure. They act on behalf of the company. I think that the role needs to broaden and it needs to include growing value. So I think it can sometimes compete with itself. So this is something that you need to think about in boards. This is one of the issues for the Institute of Directors, and we're talking with Governance New Zealand. There's a few forums that are really interested in this, is how can we help our boards become a bit more diverse in their thinking, reflect their customer bases more, so that they actually understand and connect to the markets that they're operating in. We've got massive opportunities in China, etc. Yeah. But you're right, so that's a major issue, is how can we help governance click forward and go, okay, look, your job is, yes, protect value, so challenge management, keep them honest, but at the same time, what are you doing to grow the portfolio? What are you doing to grow the business? And what kind of support? So on the one side, it's an adversarial relationship with management to say, hey, I need to challenge you to kind of give us the results and keep you honest. And on the other hand, there's also a collaborative relationship with management. What do you need to be able to explore different possibilities? And that comes down to risk,
Which presumably language like innovation is safer for a board to get their head around than playing. To what extent are we doing a good job, do you think, in innovation, and how might we do it better?
Are we doing a good job in innovation? I think having worked with Callaghan Innovation, they've done a lot of studies and they've taken a lot of data into account, and they watch very closely. That's their mandate, right? It's to help New Zealand sort of shift that needle. And I guess their honest answer is, if we had to plot innovation on a scale in New Zealand and say, look, on this end of the scale, they're sort of latent. We're barely protecting what we've got, barely extending what we've got. Sustaining innovation would be adding features and the odd thing to our product or service set that would then extend the life of it. And then there's disruptive innovation, which would be the kind of moonshots. It's we're recognizing the patterns that are going on around us, and we're positioning propositions, or we're preparing propositions that would capitalize on that. We get our surfboards in the right spot because there's waves coming. Okay, so disruptive. The bell curve, that sort of lump leans unfortunately more between sustaining and latent. And that's a reality, I think. What would change that? A whole heap of measures. I think there's a good old African proverb: it takes a whole village to raise a child. So I think for businesses, there's a whole heap of support that needs to come into play.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Can I just give an example of that one? I think what Colart says is interesting to me, because it's sort of like you can do this innovation at your own pace. But I've got several examples of clients where they've been confronted with a Workplace Safety Act, and suddenly they're confronted and they need to think innovatively. So their question is the next one what Colart's saying, and that is, how do I do it? I have to do it now. So rather than panic and treat innovation as just thinking differently, which of course it's not, they need some real tools to be doing what Colart's saying, because legislation has forced them to think differently. Yeah. Is there sort of a concept in there that says we're doing well or we're not doing well? Because those people say, where do I go and how do I get this quick indoctrination to think innovatively, because legislation's told me to do it? I mean, the classic example would be Peter Jackson. Yep. Saw the legislation coming, he recognised it, said, I'm out of here. I don't want responsibility of it. Probably other
fair.
When you've got something forced upon you and you have to think innovatively, what do you do then, is my core question.
Yeah, the word I'd replace is innovation with adapt. And so this is like kind of back to the old evolution tenets. It's adapt or die. The species that what's that Charles Darwin quote? It is not the strongest of the species that survives; it's the one most able to adapt. And so I think that's something that would need to be filled into that space. So what the advice I would give a situation like that is, look, you need to cultivate and build up an ability to adapt. So it doesn't mean that you're changing for everything, but you're working on making your business changeable. All right, and there's a bunch of practices and innovators out there. There's coaches and freely available information around. There's a lot of this is a hot topic, and there's actually surprisingly more available to businesses who are looking. But unfortunately, a lot of businesses just aren't looking. So I'd suggest that's probably one of the starting points is to go, get curious about this stuff. Say, maybe even play back. So a lot of businesses that we work with will just grab, one of their recent deliveries and unpack that and explore that a bit. And say, what happened there? Did you get the outcome you expected? What was the triggering event? Oh, we had to change because, as a recent example, we had a product company, where they had a product issue, a failure, to the tune of 500 out of their 1,500 regular clients. This was large scale products. And so they were forced to change. They were forced to turn around a rapid result, and it took the whole company, and they basically fought for survival out of that situation. But we wanted to understand what were the leading indicators to that? Was there an opportunity to sense that sooner than it actually, before it became a crisis? This idea of tiger cubs and tigers. Catch it when it's a tiger cub, cute and fuzzy. But not when it's a tiger, right? It's got claws and teeth, and it's scary.
Because customer experience is an interesting one, isn't it? Because there can be the potential misunderstanding of, right, now we need to innovate, so we need to create the Uber of our category because we're after the silver bullet.
Right.
But customer experience presumably gives us incremental little improvement opportunities.
Yeah.
Do you mind picking up on that?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's a favourite hobby horse. So customer experience, if we just define customer experience for a second, it's a really good way to think of it is it's the collection of all interactions with your brand. Mm-hmm. Take a moment to kind of understand the magnitude of it. It's not the one that actually bought your product or your service. It's the one that heard about it. It's the one that's reading the newspaper and they see a headline about something that failed or something that succeeded or a really cool experience. So it's any interactions with your brand. It actually gets quite wide. Mm-hmm. And then, the science sort of shows us that the sum of those interactions leaves them somewhere. So the sum of interactions with, say, a computer gaming company or a flower, your favorite, flower product, I don't know, it's a supermarket, would leave you somewhere. You've had a collection of potentially average experiences with them, and maybe the odd spike of delight. And then on average, you'd say, well, actually, I'm pretty committed to that brand now, Yeah. But brand loyalty is dropping. There's the rise of the empowered consumer and that sort of thing. So customer experience is a much bigger field than we currently think of it. Yes. I think it has to go beyond product or service. And with that means opportunity. Holy monkey, there's a lot of opportunity in there. And it's often missed. Like we're just blind to it because we're not really looking for it. So I heard a good example as a sort of, Clayton Christensen wrote a book called Disruptive Innovation. He's been a lecturer at Harvard Business School for many years. And, he released a new article recently about jobs to be done. Has anyone heard of Clayton Christensen's jobs to be done concept? Oh, it's such a good way to look at how customer experience can be opportunity, right? So they're saying often from a marketing perspective, we try to think of the customer and the customer experience in terms of demographics. We try to distill them down. So many people walk through the door, and 20% of them were middle-aged professional males. Maybe that's our market. I don't know. We try to distill it down to look for correlations and clustering across a wide set. But a better way to look at that is what's the job to be done. So one of the examples he gave me was. If a guy walks into a hardware store and asks a sales assistant for a power drill, what's he actually asking for? He's not asking for a power drill. He's asking for a hole in the wall at the home, right? Maybe he's even asking for an outcome of being able to see his family picture on a wall or something like that. So you've got to almost look beyond the transaction that they're using to get to the place that they actually want to get to. And that's where things get very interesting. And you start to see, well, actually there's a need that's not being currently met. They're trying to buy this thing, but the opportunities start to come in when you treat customers as individuals. These are individual people. But what holds them in common, the more interesting pattern to cluster, is what's the job to be done? And there's a lot of really amazing wins out of this. So I've got a few examples around that.
Picking up on the earlier point about sometimes out of necessity comes its greatest innovation. Yeah. And we certainly see from a communication perspective, often brands or businesses will say, look, we don't have the money to do much marketing because you don't understand the way that we work. And yet, one of the most incredible examples we've seen of great communications is Krispy Kreme's, which is a donut brand in the US. The business card of the CEO of Krispy Kreme's Donuts is redeemable for 12 donuts.
Oh, well.
The marketing director's business card is redeemable for 6 donuts, and a sales rep's redeemable for whatever else it might be. And their point is, you have to have a business card because you've got to do business with a business, but it may as well be a conversation starter. So if you took that lens, and I think to your point about the power of observation, sometimes we don't see the moments for customer experience improvements that are sitting straight in front of us.
Absolutely. That's really well summarized. I mean, the opportunities that exist in there, I think one example that we heard that's to that point was a real estate development. This is a US case study where they had, a lot of shoppers, but no buyers. Hey? Has anyone sort of had that in their business before? They get a lot of interest, but no one's actually taking money out of their pocket to buy. And they really wanted to understand that. And it's sort of been a pattern for a while. And when they went in, they started to explore what their target market was. And all the sort of standard marketing science would tell them, yes, but your target market are downsizers, so we want to catch people that are changing from big houses to apartments. So this could be, a generational thing, so getting to that sort of autumn-winter years, or it could be, professionals that have just, maybe broken up marriages and that sort of thing, and they want to kind of, so the target market, they started to distill it down to one or two things. In the end, their investigation went in and they just interviewed another similar park. Once they did the investigation, they found that there was little or no correlation, demographic correlation between all the people that were buying these condominiums, right? And this was the kind of insight for them was, wow, okay, there's all these different types of people and there doesn't seem to be any discernible pattern. They don't come from a specific nationality. In fact, it's age agnostic, so they actually seem to come across the spread. They were really confused by this. But when they went in and they started to do customer interviews, they realized there was a similar theme that came up in each one. And it was just this magic moment, the dining room table. They were worried about the dining room table. Downsizing, the dining room table for these people had become a symbol for my big house. I've raised my kids here. We've sat around this dining room table. There's actually a surprising amount of emotional baggage to process. There's a lot of weight on that dining room table. It's symbolic of something. And so once they realized that actually the job to be done for that customer was how do we help them transition from that chapter in life to the new chapter in life and make that transition easier, so they spoke to their architects, they made space available, they included a 2-year free storage option for families that would move, downsizing that would move. And they just started to think more carefully about that specific job. And of course, it changed their outcomes. So they swung from shoppers to buyers.
Yeah, right.
And so this is the kind of thing that I'm talking about, is just to get really sensitive to what is it that your customer is actually trying to achieve. They might not be able to explain that to you. That Henry Ford example of if I had asked them, they would have said faster horses. Right? They can't imagine what you might actually solve, how you might solve for them.
There's a great question that's come through that picks up the tension with innovation, however, and that's constant change. So if I'm loyal to a brand for whatever reason, and they keep changing direction and keep doing things because they are innovating, how do companies best allow loyal fans to go on the journey of change with them?
Yes, that's a great question, because it's framed up as the innovator's dilemma, right? So it's like, how do I grow my business, get new markets, new customers, without breaking what I've got, without breaking my promise to the customers that I've got? And that's a really tough balance. And I'd say the answer is never, there is no easy answer to that. And it is something that needs to be done very, very carefully, I'd suggest.
Yeah, right.
But I'd also suggest that small experiments can often help you understand how to strike that balance. So what we see is a lot of businesses that'll react to a market shift or an opportunity, and by react I mean they will mobilize the full linear waterfall, product development cycle for that. Oh, well, let's go and take those few opinions of people and then extrapolate that. So we go dark, we go internal, and we get our people to think about all the possible things that they might want, and we start to get a product development process mobilized, and as features start to grow, and this thing gathers momentum and substance, and until eventually it's sales and marketing start getting engaged. You need to start, kind of putting the messaging together for this and get the, until eventually it comes right out of the business, and the first contact with the market is this big, heavy thing that they dump on the market. Not a good strategy. What we're suggesting here is that what you want to do is develop a tighter loop with the market and generate a lot of little experiments that will help you to understand what the bigger scale is. So we have actually got a slide for this. This is a kind of a good one, frames up what I'm saying. So if you're generating an experiment for a customer, you need to have at least 3, it's like a tripod. You need to have at least 3 legs covered for that. So think about the customer experience. So think about the problem that they've got, what's the job to be done, how, what is it that they're actually trying to achieve, what's valuable to them, how much would they be willing to pay for that, what are their current alternatives, that sort of thing. So that's the customer experience lens. Then you've got your sort of product and service. That's your standard stuff. But what you've got to do is sort of is take the mindset of linear product development. So it says, oh, well, I have my first half-baked understanding of what they want, and I'm going to go dark for 18 months and then come back to you with a fully bells and whistles and da-da-da. It's that idea of, well, they only needed a light bulb, not a chandelier. So no building chandeliers. And then, of course, your business model. This is the thing that makes it sustainable. Yes, I can make that sale here, but if I multiply that up, and it doesn't take rocket science to do the sums, right? If I multiply that up, how is it actually? What kind of operation would I need to support that? And does that even make commercial sense? So the business model lens has to be there, and I think it's a sweet spot is to kind of get those 3 perspectives close enough to each other that you rapidly learn.
Yeah, right. Has anyone come across the expression design thinking? It's a great agency, IDEO, out of the US. And one of the things that they talk a lot about is rather, however, than starting with the business model, i.e. feasibility and viability, start with desirability. Because it might be that, that line B in the manufacturing plant has some capacity to make more of the same thing but with red, but we don't need that. So there's a tension there too, isn't there? What actually is most important to a customer relative to what we can do in our plant.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes, what he said. So again, I think just back to that other slide, I think it's a balance between the 3. So chicken and egg almost.
Yes.
It actually, in my experience, sometimes it's healthy because the business has just started there with, what's our next product generation going to look like? So we've worked with Fisher & Paykel Healthcare and a few others, and they've just got this natural momentum to some of the products that they take to market. They've already got in market. So our next product generation is going to look like this. And then we ask them, can you please balance that with a bit of design thinking? Go in and experiment, go and understand the context and the situations with which your product's actually going to be used, understand the sort of design thinking element out there. I'd highly recommend bringing that to the table. At the same time, think about the business model. Does it make sense? Commercially, does it make sense? Operationally, manufacturing, design? Is this something, the goose that lays the golden eggs, how are you going to keep the goose healthy? What's its sort of health and care plan and health and safety plan? So I'd suggest striking that balance is kind of getting all, it's a systemic issue, right, or balanced issue. I was going to share this slide with us. It's a sketch I did on the train the other day, and I just wanted to kind of share this with you as a way to frame up the mindset shift that sort of needs to happen. What we're talking about here is I've got a relationship with the market, okay, and a lot of that is what I'd call soldier mentality or soldier mindset. All right, it's like I've got to protect the market that I've got, so defend that market, or I've got to attack or try and acquire more market, right? So that's in the world of sort of scaled efficiency. You're there to exploit. You've got to exploit the business model, the opportunity that you've got in front of you. What we're talking about is to deal with the change and to build a bit of fitness so that it'll help you stay nimble. Right, as the market conditions change in front of you, you need to cultivate what I'd call this scout mindset. Okay, so this is where we take a collection of people together, often that represent those 3 perspectives. So somebody who's got a bit of a business brain on them, somebody who's got that product development stuff covered, but absolutely please have a design thinker or somebody that cares about their customer experience and can bring voice of the customer to the mix. And you get three of them together and you make a little scout team out of that. Now, a scout team has a different job than a soldier. Soldiers attack or defend, all right, or maintain. Scouts, so what are they there to do? They're there to learn, all right? They're there to explore a different future, bring back what they've learned, and have it inform the internal. So I had an example of a team that morale destroyed, failed experiment, blah-de-blah. And I was like, why? What happened? 3 weeks ago, you guys were doing well. You were doing customer interviews. You had a business model canvas. You had, really good feature set that you'd started to home in on. You got a team engaged with that. You were retiring risk in your engineering. What the heck? What happened? Oh, well, the CEO came in and said, JFDI, it's a fate. Why are you trying to validate everything when in actual fact we just need to take it? Just go and do it. And they all just went, oh, man, okay, let's get on with it. And what I realized there was that they had this mode switch that needed to happen. The market had spoken to them. They said, look, why are you trying new stuff when you actually need to get your existing stuff right? And what had happened was they had switched inadvertently from a scout mindset to a soldier mindset. So somebody had come in and said, listen, I'm sorry, you can put your scout stuff down, your binoculars down, stop observing and pick up a rifle and get into it.
Yeah, right.
And that's jarring for the person that has to make that mental switch. So, yeah.
I think it's a great concept there. How do you find that people are either one or the other, or do people within the team, can you be scout at some point and soldier another, or how does that work?
Can I just play the back for the Facebook feed? So the question is, are people either or both, and how they switch between them?
That's a great question, and it's a really good one for small businesses, isn't it? Where you're wearing lots of hats. Yes, I've got to protect the customer in front of me, but I've also got to be thinking differently. So I think the short answer would be, if you have to wear multiple hats, treat them like a separate hat. I'm going into a scout mode now. I just want to set up a few interviews where I just want to understand your world. And I'm exploring some possibilities here, so I'm in a scout mode. So my suggestion is, and this is something we coach teams on, is cultivate that mindset, but make time and space and processes available for that, so that they experience that mental shift. Also, for the customers or the people that you interview and speak to in the market, they don't get confused either. They're like, oh, you're here to sell me something at the farm gate, but now you're also asking me about my problems with milk, blah-de-blah over there. I'm confused. So it is a bit of a balancing act. So most of the businesses that we work with, we encourage them to set aside and create space for that to happen. So create a different, almost a physical space, like have a room or a space in the office where, well, that's our scouting space, all right? And scouting, it's a discipline. It's got systems and processes, and you need people involved in that. So treat it kind of with a bit of respect. That's a serious job to do. It is very different to soldier stuff, though. So I'd suggest, if you can, try and find some degree of separation. Even if it's the same people, give them the ability to context switch. I can walk into a room. This is why you often see private flight. There's a few really great companies that do this really well, is you'll often see an actual space with everything sprayed up on the walls. They're demonstrating their latest learnings. They're iterating on it constantly. Soldiers, like, take that hill. All right, scouts like, okay, we might want to take that hill about 50 times and then discover the method of taking that hill, because we don't just want to take the hill, we want to take the country. So there's that sort of mentality, is like actually very experimental, very scientific method based.
There's an interesting, I think it's a fascinating chart. There's an interesting thing also in scouting, isn't it? The difference between observation and insight.
Yes.
So there's a great IDEO case study where they're working with a pharmaceutical company, and they go out to scout to watch their customers using their products. And they said to an elderly lady with arthritis, do you have any problem opening our jars? And she said, no problem at all. So they said, you sure? No problem whatsoever, crippling with arthritis. And they were about to leave, but one of them said, can we just understand how you do that? And she said, sure, come with me. Took them out the back, had a power tool. She put this tablet underneath the power tool, ripped the top off, and she said, it's very easy. So there is a difference, isn't there, between what you observe rather than trying to jump to the inside.
Absolutely.
And taking some time to understand that.
Yeah. Oh, there's a lovely Arabic saying that I've adapted for startups. And the Arabic saying is, for every 1,000 men thrashing at the branches of evil, there's one striking at the root. Right. I love that. And it really speaks to that point. So for every 1,000 startups or ventures thrashing at the branches of a customer problem, there's one striking at the root.
Yeah.
And that really does speak to that issue is in that scout mentality, you often, as a soldier, miss the cues. You go and you ask, ma'am, how do you open cans? Oh, you don't have any problem? Great. Thank you for your time. And then you leave, right? That's that sort of soldier mentality, all right? But in scout mentality, it's like, can you show me? Oh, that's interesting. And what happens if you don't have any power? And what happens is, and they get really curious and they explore. Remember that room analogy just now? They explore the room a little bit more, and they kind of get into that context space. So we often say, and the science behind it is, don't solve problems from inside your building. Don't solve customer problems from inside your building. Solve customer problems with the customer. Go and sit alongside them and spend a bit of time, understanding and appreciating their world.
I love the expression that you used, fitness. So how does a business get fit for being curious?
So absolutely. So I've got sort of 3 ways or 3 things to leave in the room for that. So I think the first one is mindset, and I think we've spoken a little bit about that. So look for ways to cultivate a scout mindset. So if you send a team or you ask part of your team to go and explore a possibility, make sure that they're set up to be able to do that squiggly line stuff. All right? They can meander, that's allowed, because they're exploring a problem tree, they're exploring a space, and they're looking for an opportunity. You can't build a business on a branch. You've got to build it, closer to the trunk. So I think the first one I would suggest is mindset. The second one I'd suggest is, actually I wrote a note of that, is that customer experience side. So there are tools and frameworks freely available. One of them I'd recommend is the Lean Startup method. Learn this as a business. I think it bears great relevance for businesses, and it helps to bring those 3 elements, that customer experience, business model, and product development together, and it gives you a set of tools and techniques that you can apply quite practically and often in a very lightweight way inside your business. You can start to grow that sort of capability inside your business. So practicing that stuff. And then the third thing I'd suggest is double the rate of learning. All right? So this comes from a quote with Thomas Edison. He was interviewed, and in his interview, they asked him what his secret to success was, and he said, double your rate of failure. All right? And I think that sort of rings really true for us, is you don't have time, that squiggly line, if you need to explore a problem space, you don't have time to build too much weight into every single assumption you've made. All right? You've got to take the assumption, leave your ego aside, and let go of it really quickly if it doesn't prove to be fit enough, and go back through the cycle. So that's really about getting as many experiments done in a given year as possible. So one of the things that we coach teams on is the use of a market opportunity experiment. And we frame this up as a month long. So give it a time box. Don't allow it to use any more time. Time's precious. And in that month, you need to gather as much data and as evidence to prove and tell us that we can proclaim that that is a fit idea, that there's definitely a market for it, it solves a real problem that's valuable, and that you can actually solve it with a product or service or solution that's near to you right now, and that it's sustainable. So if you can prove that this idea is fit enough, you've got 1 month, and here's some tools, techniques, and we make sure you need to capture these 3 dimensions of customer experience, product development. Can you do it without incurring too much risk to the business? And business model, does it make commercial sense? So 1 month, that's it. All right, time's up. Where'd you get to? Oh, yeah. We thought ashtrays on motorcycles were a good idea at the start, but we got to a different place. And so that's the key thing. Is I think get as many of those experiment cycles done as possible will help you, build the fitness. So it says it actually means that you've developed a set of muscles in the business that will help you respond to circumstances. It's like, so you just drop, something's changed, health and safety. What are the implications?
Yeah.
Are there opportunities in that? Because if we're feeling that pain, other businesses might be feeling that pain. So the job to be done might have shifted for them. Is there an opportunity that's not being served right now? Is that something our ventures team or our little initiative inside, our scout team, we can send them and deploy them into that opportunity space and bring back some data? Oh yeah, we did 30 customer interviews, and this is the actual thing that's the problem. It's not the sort of surface stuff. They don't really care what the board thinks. They're actually really worried about their stats at this and so you start to get a totally different appreciation for the space that you're in.
A reasonably quick question, Colart. Books, resources, blogs, websites that you follow that the room might be able to learn from to help get fit also?
Oh, great. Where would I start? Follow World Economic Forum to get a global perspective. There's a lot of stuff happening at that actually is surprisingly practically applicable at a New Zealand level. So Global Economic Forum would be one. I'd say the sales fluctuations. Are your markets what did it do to sales? Did it dip and then climb up? What did it do to the configuration of your market sector? Are you able to understand who you thought was buying your product or service, or this was solving a problem for, versus who's actually buying it, and what are they actually using? Apple's got this idea of the 80-20 rule, or trim the tail, they often call it. They tend to go to market feature thin, so they tend to go with less features than the market might expect, and then learn and add more as they go along. All right. Whereas other methods would be, well, we're going to deploy 100, the sort of 100 features, many bullet points on the box, a long list, and then we'll listen out, might not even care actually. We're just trying to get those boxes moving. But what we fail to see is sometimes actually what are the features that are really getting used, and usually it's about 80% of that is not used as much as you might think, and that's often a source of waste. So I'd look at sort of waste, value. There's a really good simple benefits model. It's IRACIS. I always remember it as IRACIS, IRACIS. Does it increase revenue? Will it avoid cost? Will it help us avoid cost? Or will it improve service? So if you can't distill it down to those three sort of key impact areas, it might not actually make sense as an idea.
Fantastic.
Does that help? Cool. There's a few frameworks around this, and I'll probably think about one and maybe share one in a blog if you don't mind, and maybe connect up and follow on Twitter and that sort of thing. And I'll break it down a bit more. But thanks for that. It's a great question. Because if you're not sensitive to the outcome, right? If you don't know what you want, then you stand very little chance of getting what you want. You stand more chance of getting what you want if you know what you want. Yeah. So being sensitive to that is a good idea. That's right, and it creates momentum. Because often half the problem is, you get a small team, they get a great thing to market, it's innovative, but it's kind of lost in the noise, with the rest of the organization, and then it only happened once. Oh yeah, that was nice, that was last year, but things are different now.
For anyone that wants to check it, there's a great case study online called the Adobe Red Box. And the Adobe Red Box initiative was quite literally a red box that you opened up for staff. 5,000 or so employees did it. Within there was a credit card, which was loaded with a certain amount of money, and it was designed to get Adobe staff coming up with ideas on how to extend Adobe products, with a view that actually your staff know your products better than anyone, well, with the exception perhaps of your customers. So it's a very smart case study on how to help get a culture of innovation going.
Oh, that's great. And I'd even add, it reminded me of Microsoft's Connect.
Yeah, right.
And what actually started happening was their customer base started hacking the system and using it for all sorts of other things. And instead of their first reaction might have been to encrypt and and prevent that from happening, but instead the developers on the inside, on Microsoft Connect side, got very interested in how they were being used, and it ended up breaking out all these different applications that the developers couldn't possibly imagine. I walked into a team at Fish and Paykel Healthcare, actually, and they were messing around with Connect to create a visual walls workflow system. And they were standing, I just remember walking in and doing this sort of side check. Connect's only been out in 6 months, and they were saying, yeah, we hacked it, and now we can throw cards up on a wall and move them along, and look, with gestures. And it was just so fun to see that sort of play happen. Yeah. At the same time, it then starts to break out a whole new spectrum of possibilities for your product or service that you might not even know that was there.
One of the points is around how future-proofed are certain industries. So there was a stat that came out of the US recently that 56% of all jobs today in America could be replaced with a computer. Yes. That the Great Depression wiped out 20% of jobs, but the Great Disruption that we're about to head into will take out 45% of jobs in 10 years. Yeah. So then there's a thought pattern that goes, well, that's all very good, but my industry is immune from that. It's protected from that. Yeah. What's your view on, is anyone immune from this disruption we're about to go through?
I would suggest no. I think it's going to be pervasive, or it is pervasive. It's already happening, the disruption that we're calling. I mean, who's heard of the internet? Ah, okay. So as a case in point is that these things have quietly basically infiltrated our lives, and they're sitting there latent. They've only just gotten started. So it's created a network effect. Network effect is, I guess, an academic term for the telephone's an example of one, right? There's not much value in having a telephone if you're the only one on the planet who has one, right? Okay? Back in the day when it was invented, there were 2 telephones. That was it, all right? And they were expensive to make. But the minute it started getting a bit more widely used, widespread, it reached a certain network density where it was like, well, actually, it's pretty common. My bets are in that I'd be able to find a number and be able to connect with the person I want to speak to. So the value in having a phone starts to go up, A. B, the thing got cheaper, because engineers just got better and better at making them. Until eventually we end up in the world we have today, which is, hyper-connected, everyone's got a phone, that sort of thing, all right? So that network effect, I think, is one to watch. And that is driven by technology, and technology is infiltrating everything. I don't know if I can stress that enough. You've heard of Internet of Things. So this is like things, widgets, kind of making their way into your clothes, into spaces, there's a whole bunch of technologies rolling in that look expensive now, and they look pretty average, now, but they are exponential in nature. They are doubling in performance and halving in cost at regular intervals. It's like the computer chip, Moore's Law. Every 18 months, it doubles in performance and halves in cost. And so it just creates a situation where it then, the sort of drop in cost and the rise in performance reaches these inflection points where it doesn't make sense not to have one. All right, so now I'm looking around the room. Has everyone got a smartphone? Nods along. So that's an example of this. It's like suddenly the stuff becomes ubiquitous. And I think that's happening in agriculture. So Sprout Agritech down the road, that'll be a good showcase for some of the things that are coming through. And they look pretty clunky now. But, don't wait. You don't have to wait too long to be able to see actually the cost of that. They've just cracked a problem. They've validated it. They've proved it. Now they're working on how to scale it. Bam, suddenly, farmers all over the US, by the way, the market's not here, it would be the US, so all over the US are using, for instance, one example is sensor tech that helps farmers understand their moisture distributions in crops and fields, and it's proven, really useful in California with the water issues. So from moisture distribution, you then go into nutrient distribution, you start to expand that portfolio, and you're giving farmers the ability to, off an iPad, off their phone, to manage water distribution and to manage different aspects that think of jobs to be done. For farmers, it's a hard life, but digital is sort of rolling in and it's infiltrating the problem spaces. So agriculture is one of them. I can't think of an industry sector that isn't being affected by digital disruption at the moment.
That brings us to time. Oh, no, we can...
Just endorse Colart's point there. There is a very crisp newsletter that comes out frequently. People might witness it called e-marketing. It gives a lot of backup to what Colart's saying, very crisp articles every week. It's a good site to go on.
So there was a...
What came out this week was that in Australia, for the first time, the advertising dollar on mobile phones is greater than television.
Yep.
And just as a sheer fact, that would have occurred when he was thinking 5 years ago.
Great. Sorry, just for everyone that's online, that the newsletter was
It's e-market. I think it's one word. It might be e-marketing.
e-marketing.
It's an online newsletter. It's free. And just put it in the roll up and read it when you want. It's a good article.
Fantastic. Thank you.
It's a good share. Cool.
That brings us to time. Ladies and gentlemen, there's also a great book, if anyone's interested in Exponential. It's called Exponential Organizations, published by one of the key people from something called Singularity University. So that's well worth checking for exactly the curve that Colart's been talking to here. So that does bring us to time. I really hope you've enjoyed this morning, and if you could please join me with a round of appreciation for you, Colart.
Thank you, everyone.
As a small token of appreciation from Spark to your good self, Colart, thank you for coming down to be part of today.
Excellent, thank you.
And in the spirit of tokens of appreciation, to all Spark customers that are in the room this morning, a huge thank you to you. And the reason I say that is the only reason that Spark's managed to put on 151 of these events is because a Spark customer asked for it and another said it would be a good idea, and we started small and we've rolled it out, and now we take it through New Zealand. In November, we moved to a very impressive online format of exactly this. We move on our content, we move on our podcasts, our interviews, our live footage. So thank you for asking for it. And the only thing I would say in closing it is there is no such thing as a free breakfast or a free talk. And that the currency we ask for is feedback. And the reason we ask for feedback, per the conversation this morning, is we can iterate. We can find out how to do things better or differently. So on the Moby site you came in with, the bottom panel is feedback. And we would love it if you took 2 minutes to let us know what you thought of this morning. Was the content appropriate for you? Was there things that we should do differently? Should we come back? If we came back, what sort of content should we come back with? So that would be incredibly helpful. And also on this panel is a request contact. And that gives the ability for you to reach out for anyone in the Spark network to be able to help you with any requirements you might have in your business. So we have another Spark Lab series happening shortly in here at 10:30. That's on the question of social media. And the reason we're doing that one is we've had quite a few questions throughout New Zealand of people saying, look, I understand social media exists. Don't tell my daughter, my boss, my colleague, I actually don't know how to use it. So how can social media help grow your business? So that's coming up. And then we have a wonderful talk this evening at 6 o'clock, which was referred to earlier, another view of how do you best get your business match fit for the change we're about to go through. So thank you for coming along. We hope to see you again. Please check out the Facebook site there. There's an incredible community already building now online, sharing questions, self-regulating with answers, tips and tricks. Business is being done on there as we speak. So for those that have tuned in online, thank you. For those that have braved the weather this morning to be here, our appreciation. Thank you.